Okay, today we're going to take a look at troubleshooting a Royal 650 soda machine. This is going to be primarily for people where at least like half of the selections or more are saying sold out, but you can still follow the video if you just have one or two selections. The first thing we're going to want to do here is open up our door. Okay, and we're going to hit the blue programming button on our motherboard. Now this has a cover, yours may or may not have a cover, that's okay, but there is a little blue, there's a little blue push button in there. Okay, so whether you have this cover or not, just hit the little blue button. This is your programming button. And what we're going to want to do here is the first menu you get may be cache, it may be error, it just depends on the software that you have. Okay, so another thing is with these live display doors, the top row, well both rows, the top or the bottom, they go right to left. But the top row is number 1. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the top, and then on the bottom 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. When you're doing programming on the Royals, you're only using these 3 buttons. Button 1, button 2, and button 3. Button 3 is like an enter. If you press it fast, if you kind of hold it, it starts exiting you back. But let's just say cache was on the screen. Okay, well this one doesn't have it, so let's just say you had cache on the screen. You're just going to hit button 1 until you see error. Okay, once you see error, you're going to press button number 3, and if there's any errors, it's going to show you. Okay, what you're going to want to do to clear these errors out is just hold down button number 2. Just keep holding down button number 2, and then eventually it'll say none. Okay, so that's how you clear out the errors. You enter in with button 3 on the error menu, you hold down button 2 until it says none. Now really at this point what I would do is just shut the door, okay, push the door closed, and you know, let your machine go back to normal, then try the selection. Okay, if it doesn't work, well then let's go back into the programming. We're going to check a couple more things. So now at this point what I would do is I'm going to hit my blue button and we're going to get back into our programming, which again usually you'll have cache that comes up on the front of your screen. This unit usually has, this software just has error, but regardless, once you're in your programming, we're just going to hit button 1 until we see test. Okay, once you see test, we're going to use button 3 to enter. It's going to say CO1. That means column 1. Because when you're staring inside this machine, the front columns, it goes, there's tags here too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then in the back, it's columns 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's just columns. This doesn't mean soda buttons. This is physically, this test mode, it wants to know which column is the one we want to test it. So let's say we wanted to do column 3. All right, and again, that's 1, 2, 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit button 3. Now when you hit button 3, when you have the one up that you wanted to test to make sure that it's spinning, you'll hit button 3. You'll get this little symbol. All right, so when you're doing the test, make sure you get this symbol. That's like mimicking the scoopers. I don't know if you can hear that, but the motor is spinning right now, but I'll just do it. Now, if you have drinks inside your machine when you're doing this, you're gonna have to catch it. Normally, I would use like I would hover my left hand over this and then try to catch it with my right hand. But if you're doing this by yourself, make sure you put something down there, especially if it's a can of soda. You don't want it to pop on you. But let's just do this again so you can see. So I'm gonna hit column 3. I got the symbol. And I'm going to make sure that that's spinning, which it is. So that's a good sign. If your machine was saying sold out and this motor is spinning in test mode, Well, then we have to look at a couple more options. So we cleared out the errors, we went into test mode, we tested that this was spinning. Now, if there was a bunch of others that weren't working, I would go ahead and test those now. Just go through, you would just hit button 1, say go to the next one, hit button 3, we got the symbol, and column 4 spinning now. Now, let's just say that it wasn't spinning. So if you have a selection that's not working, you do this test mode and it doesn't spin in the test, there's only two possibilities. Either the motor itself is bad, or the plugs underneath can be a little finicky. So you see these little plugs right there? Alright, these little plugs, they're just like little 2-wire plugs. Sometimes they'll be hooked together, or they'll look like it, but you just have to push them towards each other, you know. I only have one hand, but you get the idea. You want to push these wires into the plastic and kind of push them in on each other, because they can be a little fidgety. I've seen them before where they look like they're hooked up and we just had to cram them together a little better so they make a little better contact. So if you do a test mode and you check this wire and you check the plug real good and it still doesn't spin, well, then that means you got a bad motor. Your motors could be black, they could be white. I have a separate video on how to replace the motors. It's really not hard at all. Okay, but when you're doing that test though, make sure you have to verify that you're getting this little symbol. Alright, so that's just mimicking that it's working. Alright, so let's say we cleared the errors, we went into test mode, we tested it out, the thing is still spinning, and then let's say you shut the door and it still isn't working. Okay, there's still another thing we can check. There's two more things we can check. The first thing I would say is, at this point, is on this motherboard right here, there's a little LED. So you have your, normally there's not a cover here, but you have there's a little light in that bottom right, you know, it's right, our blue button's there, it's just like an inch below, right there, there's a little light. Now, what happens is there's a pressure sensor on here, right, where the drinks fall. It detects it, and that's how the machine knows. So what you want to do is, I'm going to see if I can get this on camera. You got to stare at this motherboard and then smack the chute. You see that light? That little light should only blink when you smack this bin. Now, if you look at this light and you're not smacking the bin right now, we're just standing here. If that light's solid red or it's constantly triggering, well, then there's a little dial on it. I have a separate video for that. So if you come to your machine and that little red light's blinking right now by itself, or it's just solid lit red, you have a problem. Or if you smack it, you smack all around here and that red light doesn't turn on, well, then we got to adjust that trim pot. So let's say everything like how it is now. We're smacking it, the light's blinking, and we did a test vend and the motor spins. We cleared out all the errors. The very last thing you want to check I'm going to hit my blue button. I'm going to get back into my programming. So what you're going to want to do now is go back in there and we're going to hit button 1. Let me Alright, we're going to hit button 1 and we're going to go and look for a menu called STOS. Now STOS, yours might be like this where it's password protected. If you keep flipping through and you got like the same 4 or 5 menus, okay, that means you have to go through a password. That's what that PASS is. So you see that there? Alright, now to get through the password, you got to press 3, then 4, 2, 3, 1. And now you'll see cache. you got to go through this password, and this will give you some of the more advanced menus. Now, because there's really about 20 different menus. See, there's all these different menus. And once you go through the password, you can get to there. So again, to get through the password, you hit 3, it'll go blank, then you do 4, 2, 3, 1. And then it should say cache. But now what we're going to do, this is the very last thing we're going to check. We want to see this STOS menu. You see that there? So STOS, this is how you link like whatever selections on the front go to the inside columns back there. So we're going to hit button number 3 to enter, and it's going to, I didn't hit that hard enough. Button number 3. So this is going to give us OPT and a number. So there's different presets. Now I go through this in the main tutorial, but just to cover it real quick. See, there's different presets you can pick. Now this is on option 5 right now. So option 5, and again, this, sometimes the back of the door here, this is an old sticker, it doesn't match the software, but let's just say it does, okay? Because a lot of times you're going to want it on option 5. Some of you will have it on option 1 where selection button 1 links to columns 1 and 2. Selection button 2 links to columns 3 and 4. Selection number 3, so these are like the selections on the front of the door, and then depending on which option set you choose, those are the columns that link to that button. So like if we have option 5 here, alright, selection 1 links to column 1. Selection 2 on the front of the door links to columns 2, 3, and 8. Alright, so you can have different option sets, but the whole point of this really, before I'm getting too sidetracked, the whole point of this is get here on your options and then hit number 3. Because if you change these options, some of them link to like where some of these buttons aren't linked to a selection on the inside. Now you see it's just reading off what these are all linked to. It's hard, you don't have to understand this, but at least not in this video. I have a separate video that kind of goes over this. But basically, if you were to pick one of these, I've had people do this on accident, they've changed these. So like, let's say right here, if you have option 6 or 7, so let's say option 7, if you went to this and it said OPT 7, that's probably your issue. Selection button 1 links to columns 1 and 7, 2s to 2 and 8, etc. But then selections 7, 8, 9, and 10, they're not assigned to anything. See, so that's really where the problem comes in, especially if you have like your last 4. So like if you're having an issue where your last 4 slots, like down here, none of these ones work, they all just say sold out, well, chances are you had your thing on option 7. So, and again, to verify, you just go to this STOS menu. Okay, you go to STOS, you hit button 3, and then see what option it's on. Most of you are going to be on option 5 or option 1. But again, you can pick different options. But that's the very last thing. So if clearing your errors doesn't fix it, then test the motors. Okay, if you test the motors, check the plugs underneath, make sure those are working. If it's still not working, then check the light on that motherboard. Okay, make sure that that light's like just not blinking or lit by itself, and furthermore, make sure it does blink when you smack that chute down there. And then very lastly, come into this STOS menu and check your option. Most of you are going to be on option 1 or option 5. But again, you have to be careful when you adjust this. I would say just look in here and see if you're on option 7 or option 8, because there's different option sets. You know, there's different ways that buttons can link to the columns, and if you're not familiar, you could cause yourself a little grief. But I've seen people accidentally switch them to some of these where they're not assigned. But again, to tell if you're this far deep into the troubleshooting, it would be generally like the last few selections here on the bottom won't be working, but everything else will, you know. But between all of that, one of those steps is definitely going to help you troubleshoot and figure out what's wrong. 80% of you will just have to go in, clear out your errors, and that's going to fix it. Or do a test vend, clear out your errors, and then that should be done. Every once in a while I'll have someone with the issue with the lights, and they have to adjust the trim pot, but that's very rare. And then even more rare is people accidentally setting the STOS menu to like option 7 or just a weird option type. So I hope that helps you out. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call. Thank you.